Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Patrick Malone, and I'm the director of the Key Executive Leadership Programs at American University. Just wanted to say thank you very much to Treasury Executive Institute, Senior Executive Association, and Young Government Leaders for hosting our event. Very sorry for those of you who tried to log in with us on Monday. We ran into so many technical problems. It turns out that there were some issues with Zoom nationally on that day, so we kind of figured out what it was. But what I wanted to do is go through this presentation for everyone, and then also hopefully we'll be able to schedule a question and answer session a little bit later on in the month. In the meantime, welcome. This is the Uncanny Power of Kindness in Leadership. And as I prepared this presentation, one of the things I made note of as I was getting ready was that this really isn't about the uncanny power of kindness. It's really about kindness now. And the reason is that our workplace, our workforce are facing so many huge challenges. What I'd like to do in this little bit of time that we have together is I'd like to share with you some of the challenges that the workplace is facing in terms of anxiety and fear and loneliness, and kind of set the stage for why kindness matters now more than ever. And I'll give you the data and all the numbers so that you can have a look at this and kind of make your own decision. But I think you'll agree that it is now more so than ever time for kindness, not only in the workplace, but in our lives as well. Somewhere around mid-March, our world changed significantly. We all know that. It was one day we were all going out and living our normal lives, and all of a sudden things started to look different. Things started shutting down. The isolation began, and the workplace really began to feel the challenges of this new world that we were living in. Our workforce right now are stressed, they're afraid, and they're lonely. And what's interesting about this is that research was released early this year, prior to the pandemic hitting the United States, that talked about these three things. So, what I'm about to share with you are some of the numbers and some of the data about what our workforce looks like. And everything I show you is pre COVID. So, we'll keep in mind how this has changed since COVID has hit, and it's been pretty extraordinary. So our workforce is stressed. 83% of U.S. workforce suffers from some work-related stress. So eight in 10 people that we see or know are suffering from stress, which is a very high number. Of course, the amount of money that we lose every year, $300 billion as a result of workplace stress, and a million or so workers to miss work every day. This is Gallup data from 2019. We also know people are afraid. This research was released early this year. I actually pulled it down on March 4th of this year. And this research was done at Chapman University. And what they do is they do an American fear survey every year where they ask people, what are you most afraid of? Of the top 10 fears that Americans have, 3 of the top 10 are related to illness and medical bills and dying. So this was pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, 3 of the top 10 fears were related to illness, dying, or medical bills. Imagine how that has changed since this survey was released in January. Incidentally, the number one fear for people in the United States, I've asked this question many times in these sessions, and usually I hear terrorism, losing your job, that kind of thing. The number one fear, corrupt government. So people are not only afraid of becoming ill, dying, and high medical bills, but they're afraid of corrupt government. That's what Americans are saying now. And here we are in the midst of a pandemic trying to deal with all of this. In fact, there was a briefing a few weeks back at the White House where an NBC reporter asked the question, what do you say to Americans who are watching you right now and who are scared? The president did not choose to answer that question. He went a different direction with his answer, but the mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor Eric Garcetti, did. Mayor Garcetti said, you know what? Americans need to know it's okay to be scared. And we are. Right now, Americans are frightened beyond belief. The economy, the sheltering in place, everywhere we go is an abundance of caution. And it is just a very different world for all of us now. And addressing that fear and understanding that fear is crucial for us as we attempt to move forward in this new world. People are also lonely. This research was done in 2015 by Brigham Young University, where they talked about the increased rate of loneliness and mortality, or increased rate of social isolation and loneliness are all tied to increased mortality. So you're more likely to die early if you're lonely or isolated. And there's been research since 2000, for the last 20 years, that has been showing this very same message. Most recently in 2020, and in January of this year, Cigna released their U.S. Loneliness Index and found that 61% of Americans surveyed report being lonely, which is a devastating physiological and physical and also a mental barrier for all of us. So those that we lead are lonely. They're afraid and they're stressed. And with the virus, we've seen different types of approaches to dealing with that. We've certainly seen an increased use of alcohol, tobacco, and drugs, chronic health problems because people are not able to care for themselves the way they were, have worsened. People are struggling to sleep and to concentrate. But one of the most important things is the change in routine. We as human beings are committed to constancy and predictability. Even the craziest among us who want to say, oh, I just do things differently, I'm so wacky, I'm off the wall. Even the craziest people have some sense of routine in their lives, even if it's being routinely unroutine. When we have a change in routine, it impacts us tremendously. And that can be something as simple as just our getting up and getting dressed and going to work versus getting up and going to the gym or going to Starbucks or whatever we happen to do. All those routines have changed, and now we're establishing new routines that work for us. But this is a big adjustment for all of us, is the change in routine, and it contributes to the stress that we feel in our lives. So if ever there was a time for kindness, now would be it. And in fact, Jack Kerouac was the founder of the Beatnik movement in the 60s, and I am a child of the 60s. So for me, I love this quote: practice kindness all day to everybody, and you realize you're already in heaven now. If ever there was a time for kindness, now is the time. And I do have a theory about kindness, and that is, if more people were Dallas Cowboy fans, we'd have a kinder world. Now, normally at this time, I hear raucous laughter coming from the audience, and I do enjoy hearing that. So that is my kindness theory. That is Dak Prescott, the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. He is pointing to God, because the Dallas Cowboys are not America's team. They are God's team. And for those of you that are still on this session and listening, I will move on from the Dallas Cowboys. Question that I like to ask everyone initially, and this is one that we wanted to do on Monday, is what is the kindest state in the U.S.? Interestingly, the kindest state in the U.S. is Minnesota. There must be something to that Midwestern kindness, followed by Tennessee and South Carolina, Texas, Wyoming, Indiana, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Hawaii. Unkind state, usually people get this one right. They usually say New York, and they're absolutely right. New York is listed as the most unkind state as of last year, followed by Arkansas, Delaware, Massachusetts, Arkansas, which is kind of odd. It's kind of the South. I'm not sure why that's there. Delaware, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Washington. I have daughters that live in Washington, and they say that that is definitely true, especially where they live in Seattle. Not the kindest place in the world, which you would think with all the trees and everything, it would be different. But New Hampshire, Nevada, Florida, and Rhode Island. We know kindness when we see it, and we know it when we don't. And the fact is, we aren't tremendously kind to one another. In fact, if you do a Google search on kindness, and I did one of these several months back, most of the pictures I saw were of children. I thought, well, that's kind of nice, I guess, and cute, but why would we just see children and fuzzy animals and things? We do struggle with kindness. There is a serious kindness deficit in our nation today, and there has been for some time now. The impact of this is extraordinary. Long-term impact, depressed immune systems, elevated glucocorticoids, which are terrible. They're bad for obesity and blood problems. One study in 2012 tracked women for 10 years in the workplace and found that they were 38% more likely to have a heart-related event because of working in a toxic work environment. A 2018 study found that gratitude and compassion were a stronger indicator of clinical expertise than clinical expertise itself. In fact, patients typically look to their providers for gratitude, compassion, and caring and good listening skills more than they do their clinical expertise. We assume that physicians and nurses are clinically competent, but we don't really know that. But what we do is that we make our assessment of that based on how they treat us. I used to teach at a medical school, and when I was on the faculty there, I taught this to medical students about the importance of connection with their patients. Don't sit and type with your back to your patient. Look them in the eye, talk to them face to face, let them speak and listen. Very important, very important. So we know that the impact of unkindness on the job is definitely there, but there's more. So one study found that 4,500 doctors and nurses and staff that and 71% of them attributed medical errors to unkindness. 27% attributed medical error, patient deaths rather, to unkindness as well. I can tell you from firsthand experience, this is true. I put myself through college as a surgical technologist. So I used to scrub in surgery. I scrubbed on everything: open hearts, craniotomies, kidney transplant team, everything you can imagine. Did that for years when I was a young man. And I can tell you that when you have a very tense moment in the operating room, if you are on the receiving end of a surgeon yelling at you or throwing something at you, and those things do happen, they happen very often, it's very difficult to focus. And when you can't focus, especially in that role, you may inadvertently hand the surgeon the wrong instrument or the wrong medication. So this resonates with me very much. In fact, David Rock rather did some really cool research on this. David runs the Neuroscience Leadership Institute, and what he talks about is neural shutdown, which is exactly what happens to us when we are treated in an unkind way, or when we witness unkind treatment. We go into neural shutdown, which makes us not as productive. It makes us not as innovative, not as creative. There was a study done years ago at a seminary, a very famous study actually, about what they did is they divided the seminarians into two different groups. One group that walked one direction to class witnessed two actors portraying a person demeaning a homeless person. So both actors, one pretending to be homeless, one pretending to be mean, saying very mean things and criticizing them and yelling at them. The seminarians that saw this interaction went to class and were given tests on innovation and creativity. Likewise, in a different part of campus where the actors weren't, the seminarians went to class there as well. They were given the same test. Guess who scored higher in innovation and creativity? The ones that did not witness the rude treatment of the homeless person. And what that tells us is that when we witness unkindness, it has a direct impact on the way we think and the way we see the world. And it keeps us from being creative and compassionate and caring and innovative. And if there's one thing we need in our workforce now, it's creativity, it's innovation. We are all in the public service, and the public service is never going to be completely resourced. It doesn't matter who's in office. We're never going to have all the resources we need. It doesn't happen. That's part of being in the public service. So our last great ability to tap into something, our really great resource, is the human mind and the soul and the heart of the people that we work with and that work for us. When those folks are in neural shutdown, they're not going to be accessible for their creativity and their innovation. So the impact of unkindness in the workplace, definitely significant. I like to ask this question as well. The kindest thing we've witnessed recently, usually it's someone opening a door for someone or paying for someone behind them at a restaurant or something along those lines. And those are all very kind. We are so genetically predispositioned to do this. It's fascinating. You know, children are more inclined to feel empathy for others. 18-month-olds, in fact, what they will do is they will reach out and attempt to provide comfort to other children or to fuzzy things, a sad looking bear, something like that they see, that they sense need their comfort. And they do this naturally without any exchange theory, without any concept of what they can do for them. It's not there. It's a natural inclination for all of us. And so it begins very early. It's not that difficult. And there's a lot of great studies out there. Sean Anker talks about doing something kind for 2 minutes for 21 days will rewire the brain. And what he's talking about is the neural circuitry that we use when we think. We typically think on a very horizontal plane. We don't think outside of that plane very often. It's necessary for survival. It's necessary for confidence. But whenever we're challenged or we do something different, we create new neural pathways. By doing something like that over and over again, we create that pathway and we continue to practice until it becomes natural to us, just like the previous lines of thought had been. We know that kindness contributes to job success, to wealth, to better relationships, to better health. We also know that people that smile and that treat each other kindly are perceived as 27% more warm, more competent, and more civil. So this is just based solely on a smile and a connection and a gentle nature. It's so easy to do when we really think about it, and it has an extraordinary impact on the workplace. Other research at Oxford and other universities as well talked about the impact of kindness on well-being. Kindness is ranked above physical attractiveness on dating sites consistently. Patients' colds shortened by a day if they're being treated by providers who are kind to them and they feel cared for. Kindness also lowers the effects of stress and social anxiety. So the benefits are definitely there. I want to commend to you a terrific website, University of California, Berkeley, the Greater Good Science Center. The Greater Good Science Center is doing a lot of research on kindness and compassion and happiness. And they've had some pretty extraordinary findings over the years. They found that people that were in lower socioeconomic classes had stronger vagal nerve responses. Now, what this means is the vagal nerve is what is stimulated when we act in a kind way or when we witness acts of kindness. The vagal nerve, it runs from what's called the periaqueductal gray in the very base of the brain all the way down into our abdomen and into various parts of our bodies. And that vagal nerve actually can be measured. The response can be measured. And what they found is that lower class individuals, lower socioeconomic class individuals, less educated, less wealthy, are having a stronger response. In other words, they're kind of kinder. They're kinder. And they react when they're shown pictures of people in suffering. They tend to react in a more kind way than people who are better educated and wealthier. And what's frightening about this, everyone, is that people that are better educated and wealthier are the ones that run our nation. What the University of California, Berkeley professors are afraid of is what they're calling a compassion deficit in our nation, where compassion is no longer the product of being wealthy and rich and in power, but rather it's only the product of those that are poor and less educated. It's a very frightening thought. They've also found that poor people give more money as a greater percentage of their income for charities. This has been consistent for years. We know this with any of the federal giving, um, the federal giving um, efforts every year or charities. It happens. It's consistent. People with less money give a greater percentage of their income to others. We also suspect that we spend more of our time maximizing self-interest and less of a focus on others. And maybe it would be nice if we could flip those numbers a bit and spend a little more time thinking of other people. This is my Jeep. And the reason I put this out there is I would like people to know that the Jeep wave is a real thing. And how this relates to kindness is that people that drive Jeep Wranglers wave to each other. And it's a pleasure. It's such a nice feeling every day to get a nice wave and a smile from a stranger. And it's much like motorcyclists, even though motorcyclists can't usually see each other's faces when they're driving. And sometimes with boaters in the boating industry, it's the same way. But it's pretty intriguing because for motorcyclists, it's any motorcycle. For boats, it's any boat. But for Jeeps, it's only the Wrangler. Only Wrangler drivers do this. And it is a real thing. It really does happen. I've driven Jeeps most of my life, and this is one of the reasons I enjoy it, because I love getting that wave from people. So at this point, my guess is you're probably asking about, well, what does this matter for the workplace? Because this is one of those key executive leadership programs, soft, warm, fuzzy skills, and it definitely is. And we're very proud of this. This is what we're about. But look at this number in the workplace. This was a number that was published last year at the end of the year in the journal Emotion, research by neuroscientists that suggested that workers who are treated kindly by their bosses and treated with compassion are 287% more likely to be compassionate and caring to others. So guess what? That means that the bosses, it starts with us. It starts with us. We're the ones that can do this. And when we do this, we know that people will respond to it, and it will make our workplace a better place. You know, there is, in addition to the warm feelings that we get from kindness and compassion, just as individuals with our friends and family, it does have an organizational impact. A 12% increase in production in many cases, better retention for sure, more positive employees, a happier work environment, a more creative work environment, a more trusting work environment. Look at the Federal Executive Viewpoint Survey. Every single year, it never has responses where people say that they want their boss to know more about federal acquisition regulations. What it asks for, what people are yearning for, is a connection with others. They're yearning for compassion and caring. And I'm not saying that people aren't held accountable. They are most definitely held accountable. for performance in their work. But what people really want is connection with one another, and it makes the workplace a better place. And there's a few ways we can do that. Revising our mission and values, being very clear with employees. And when I say being very clear and revising mission, I'm talking about putting words like kindness and love and compassion in your mission, in your values, in your operating procedures. It's not hard to do. Let's put them in there and let's be clear with people. This is what we expect. And when we don't see it, we will call it out and we will say, this is not acceptable behavior in this organization and not in this environment. Hiring better. Many organizations now are asking questions about kindness and empathy as part of the hiring process. They're saying, give me an example of a time when you were empathetic in the workplace. And in some cases, another very good question, give me an example of a time when you were overly empathetic in the workplace, because empathy can be a two-edged sword. We definitely want it without question. But if we become too empathetic, we become someone's support system. They suffer, we suffer, our organization suffers. It's not a good thing. But putting those questions in the hiring process can make a huge difference. Helping de-energizers. So de-energizers are the people that suck the air out of the room when they walk into the room. We know they're there. We adore them anyway, but we know they're there. And sometimes we may be that person. And we need to know that. We need to know why we present ourselves with that kind of presence, with that kind of energy. What is it about our body language or the language we use that creates that kind of de-energizing environment? And let's help people that may not be aware of that, or help ourselves if we don't understand. Recognizing kind behavior, calling it out. I saw an agency one time that they had a kindness board, and people would just go right on the board, either something kind that they did or something that they witnessed. And it was very powerful for people to just take a break, take a nice long deep breath, and see the nice things people are doing to others. And remember what I said before, when we witness this, when we're exposed to this, we are more likely to do it. So lots of positives with recognizing kind behavior. From a personal strategy, being good with self, number one, now, and especially in this pandemic, taking care of ourselves is job number one. I was doing a presentation for the Peace Corps recently, and they had posed 3 questions to me, and they were all about how they could care for other people. They had recalled 7,000 people to the States. They had some serious issues that they were dealing with. And I laughed and said, that's such a typical Peace Corps question. What can we do for others? But in reality, it's a question that most public servants ask, is what can we do for others? Because people in the public service serve the public, and they serve others, and they serve. So remember, being good to self matters. It's first. We're the only gift we have to others. We're the only gift that we completely own. So we owe it to ourselves to take care of ourselves, to acknowledge that anxiety, those fears, that loneliness that we mentioned earlier in the presentation. Being clear with the people that work for us in terms of our expectations, especially now. 72% of the workforce right now reports being afraid that their bosses are going to find them not productive during this pandemic. They're worried about working online because there's a lot of bad press about working online. By the way, bad press that is really not warranted. There's so much that telework can do in appropriate jobs. And it's unfortunate that we have leaders out there that just dismiss it offhand, because we can probably have a telework force of over 50% of our workforce and be perfectly fine. If there's one thing that the federal government has proven in the last couple of months, telework works, and it works well for the federal government. But we must be clear. We must be clear with the people we lead about what it is that we want them to do. Brene Brown once said, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. It's on us as leaders to be clear. It's also on us to be vulnerable and humble and appreciative and encouraging and present. And present is a difficult thing for us to do now because of the environment we're in. We can't make direct eye contact with people online. It's not possible to do that. Sound is a challenge online many times, especially if there are technical issues, but just the dynamics of sound that occur between two human beings is a struggle whenever we have an online intermediary. So being present is hard, but it's the challenge we have now to do the best we can with the platforms we have, but it is something that we need to continue to work on. Your homework is this. On February 17th, it's the National Random Acts of Kindness Day. do me a favor and put this in your phones as a recurring event. And every February 17th, if you would send me an email and tell me something you did that was kind, I would greatly appreciate it. I've been doing this now for some time, and I'm trying to get 1,000 emails in one day so that I can break the American University server. That would be the goal. But it is a great way to kind of make this front and center in your life, to just put this in your phone. It's a recurring National Random Acts of Kindness Day. Put pmalone at american.edu and send me an email and say, hey, Patrick, this is what I did that was kind today. And I'm going to get all that put together, and I'm going to send some stuff out to my friends out at Berkeley and talk about what a great federal workforce we have as soon as I can get 1,000 responses in one day. So that would be terrific. Please do that. And by all means, if you have questions, I hope we're able to do a Q&A session on this a little bit further down the line. It would certainly be welcome. I would love to talk with any of you about what this looks like, about what the research is saying, about some of the things that we can do as leaders. It's an easy concept. It's not easy to apply. I'm afraid that we get lost in sometimes our desire to want to have the next great acronym of leadership or the next great report that comes out that has 100,000 different graphics in it that tells us that in order to be a leader, you must put these pieces together this way. That stuff is really useless in my view. Leadership is about connection first and foremost. It's about kindness and caring first and foremost. It's about serving others first and foremost. And we can do that and be strong and hold people accountable and run really wonderful organizations. Let's begin with some kindness. Let's make that happen. This is my last slide, and different ways you can reach us at American University in our programs. It has been a pleasure making this quick video for you. I hope that it has been helpful, and please do reach out to me with any questions or concerns you may have. I'd be delighted to talk with you, and I'll be looking forward to our Q&A session a little bit further down the line. Thank you all. Have a great day and stay safe.